Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null. Nice to have you with us. This is one of those days where I just wish I had 2 hours to broadcast because I have so much information. So I'm going to give you enough of each topic for you to get the idea of what's important. We're going to talk about what's going wrong in the American hospital, starting with the epicenter hospital for COVID over in Jamaica, in Queens, in New York State. And everything that they're doing seems to be wrong. Who says? A conscientious whistleblowing nurse who, after seeing how horrendous the situation was, began to secretly film them. And so you're going to watch as well as listen today, but all of you have access to the internet, so go to prn.fm and you'll be able to watch this in real time. And we're going to play anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes of that. It's horrific, and it shows you why everything they tell you about how to treat COVID is wrong. These guys are clueless, and they're dangerous and irresponsible. Yet none will be held accountable because the governor identified all hospitals, all people working in them, anyone with COVID. There's no way that you can sue them. Boy, there'd be a lot of lawsuits if you could, starting with suing the governor. Anyhow, we also have a motivational, upbeat, positive talk that I recently completed, and it's broken into 3 parts, short parts, anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. Each part's a little different, but all of it is meant to help us get through these crises that we're in, no matter what the crisis, financial, emotional, loss. Then how do you do it and still stay sane? How do you do it and still maintain a quality of life and be positive? So we're going to play some of that today. Richard Gale is going to come on, and we're going to challenge Cuomo and another gentleman over at CNN who suggested that all the violence, the burnings, the beatings, the looting, somehow this whole phenomena, separate from the legitimacy that I support, and I'm sure most of the people in America support, of having real police reform. So we just once and for all stop this whole madness of how the police have been militarized and wrong people selected, and the consequences are horrific, especially for people of color and those who do not have the capacity to fight back. The whole system is corrupt, the justice system itself. And we want to see this completely overhauled. I've been harping on this for decades. But that should not be conflated and confused with those who exploit these legitimate protests for equality with those who are simply criminal elements or agent provocateurs and not Marxists. I keep hearing people say, oh, these are Marxists. Marxist was nonviolent. I mean, please do your homework. Even pretend to have a little intellect. It was Lenin who was the violent one. He's the one who would engage in any form of violence to get an end. It was Marx who believed that as long as we have a collective conscious awareness of what should change on the capitalist model, then we could go to a more utopian place. Well, that's delusional, but at least it was nonviolent. So it's not the Marxists who are in the streets burning things down. Those are Leninists and anarchists, more often than not anarchists. So we're going to have a discussion on that. We start always with the latest on health and healing. Now, after the tape, you're going to have an opportunity to call in on our talkback line and share your points of view. We don't censor people here today, but people do get censored. For example, we're going to talk about how Gray Zone, which is a very important site, and 2 of the best people out there are running this site, Ben Norton and Max Blumenthal. Well, they've been censored and kicked under the bus by Wikipedia. They're fighting back. By the way, we've sent Ben Norton and Max Blumenthal 72 articles we've written against Wikipedia, 11 legal letters to its board, and we will be helping them. But the big surprise is, I didn't write all these articles, and our attorneys didn't write these letters simply to remind them how dysfunctional and biased and arbitrary were their editors. No, this is leading to something, and it's quickly approaching because we've just been given a mother lode from someone on the inside. I can't go further than that because I'm not going to tip the hand until they get served with papers. Then we'll do a press conference on that day. It could sink Wikipedia, which would be a good thing for the world since it has so much misinformation that can be detrimental to people's well-being. Anyhow, we'll talk about that. But we begin by the latest on health and healing. From the Medical College of Georgia, a high-salt diet, which is the average American diet. Think of your potato chips, your French fries, all the processed meats, all the pizzas, that's all very high in sodium. That's not good for your gut microbiome. Particularly with females, this study has shown with untreated hypertension. Now, most people who have hypertension, where it's gotten to where they're dizzy, they'll faint, they'll flush, their blood pressure fluctuate, their pulse can go way down, their blood pressure can go way up, and then they finally get tested, say, oh my goodness, I have, hypertension, and they'll be put on medications, not what are called stable chronic hypertension, meaning they're going to have it the rest of their life because they're not told how to reverse it, which is relatively easy to reverse hypertension, as is diabetes. But think of the people who don't have the diagnosis yet. That's probably equal to those who do. So you're talking about 65 million more or less who've been diagnosed and probably another 60 million who have not. And all those people eating all that salt, that is one of the worst things you can do for the bacteria in your gut, and that in turn is not good for blood pressure. So if you have untreated hypertension, and especially if you're a female, and if your sodium goes up more than, let's say, 2,300 milligrams, then when it's above that, and it can easily get up to 5,000 milligrams, then you're going to end up having some real health problems. So you're both hurting your blood pressure directly and your gut microbiome, and that can impact your bacteria all over your body. So if you're really tasting for salt, you want that taste, and you've baked a potato, squirt lemon juice on it. You won't get the sodium, but you'll get the same kind of slightly acidic quality, tartness, that salt gives you. So that's one of the things I do all the time. When I'm teaching a cooking class, for example, I'll juice up some fresh lemons, some fresh limes, some fresh oranges, tangerines, and it is called a reduction. Now, you can do a reduction by cooking something down, or you can do a reduction by blending it down or juicing it down. I generally do the juicing. So what it would mean is, those little spritzer bottles that you put alcohol in. And by the way, just for all of you who are doing your best, and good for you for being sanitary, forget COVID, just be sanitary. Alcohol down your keyboard every day, your telephone, your desk, your arm, your chair, everything, doorknobs in particular, toilet handle, sinks, outdoor doorknob coming in, going out. And you run out of alcohol. It's very hard to find alcohol today, so do what I do. Buy a 55-gallon drum. All right? It's not that expensive, and now you've got enough alcohol for the next 5 years. And it then becomes like 1/3 the price of what you'll pay if you're able to find any alcohol in a store. Now, of course, hydrogen peroxide will do the same thing, but you get a 99% alcohol. It's going to kill every bacteria and virus there is. You always let it sit for about 60 seconds. Then rub it down with a paper towel. That'll disinfect the surface. Anyhow, so let's say I juice some lemons, and then I will put it through a simple strainer, so it's just a pure juice. Now, when I make a salad, and let's say I make a salad of endive, radicchio, radishes, some fresh fennel cut up into it, and then I want to impart a unique flavor. Well, I can lightly saute some pine nuts, dry roast them, but not till they're burnt, just slightly browned, because then it gives a different flavor and mouthfeel. I put those in there, and then I'll take a pomegranate, and I'll peel pomegranate, and I'll shovel out all of the, scoop out all of the little orbs, that are so delicious and beneficial. Now, the seasoning is what's important. For this, I will have juiced some fennel. So I'll have a little bit of fennel, and I'll spray on the salad. I'll spritz on the salad a misty lemon. Then I'll spray the misty fennel. Then I'll roll it around so you're getting the just the delicate taste, not soaked in, like most people put on salad dressing. Just empty a lot of it on there. Make it wet, way too wet. You want the salad dressing to allow the subtle flavor of what you're eating to be manifest. And that's what a good salad dressing will do. So you could do 20, 30 different renditions of a salad dressing. And therefore, every time you eat it, it gives you a different flavor. But that's how you get rid of sodium. For example, if I have a potato, like a sweet potato, and I'll make myself a little curry, maybe a teaspoon of a curry sauce, and then when I open up the sweet potato, I mash in and mix the curry with the sweet potato, and then I'll sprinkle on some anise powder, and then spray that with tangerine juice. Now, you talk about having something absolutely delectable. Then take some cucumbers and wash them thoroughly, and then cut them in little thicker slices, maybe a 1/4 inch. Now, then circle your sweet potato with the cucumber, and then dip the cucumber into that sweet potato mash that has the curry in it, and now you've got some delectable flavors. Easy to do. I'm working on a new cookbook, and it's all desserts, sugar-free, gluten-free, vegan, and hopefully that'll be my next cookbook. So I'm always experimenting in the kitchen. Hopefully you are as well. So also, you don't want a lot. Now, they're suggesting 2,300 milligrams daily. I feel that's far too high. I believe it should be around 1,200 milligrams a day. Keep your blood pressure down. From Harvard School of Public Health comes an article published in the peer-reviewed American Journal of Preventive Medicine that takes a close look at the benefits of volunteering to your health and well-being, but both validating and the whole idea that when you do good for other people, it does good for you. But it does, especially when you do something where people were having a hard time on their own. I remember once down in Texas, when I was living down in Texas from 1989 to 1995, and there's 200 acres. That's a big place. And it ended up at Lake Ray Roberts. And so it's time to do it. Now there they do large round bales. And so I went out with a tractor and began, and suddenly a bunch of trucks came up. And about 6, 7 guys got off, and they came over. And they said, "Hi." I said, "Hi." And they said, "Want some help?" I said, "Well, I've got this." They said, "Well, we've got a baling machine that can do it probably in 10 times faster." And I said, "What would you charge me?" He said, "We're not going to charge you anything. You're our neighbor." I said, "Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's kind." And I went inside and made up a whole bunch of ice-cold watermelon and lemonade. And so all day long I was serving these fellows some cold beverages and fruit. And by the end of the day, they had baled all 200 acres. That would have taken me 4 days to do. Now, they left. And so then I found out who they were. And so any time that I could help them, I would go over. One guy was putting on a roof. I was over there, strapped up with all the equipment, ready to roll. He just kind of smiled, didn't say a word. I mean, not a word. I get there. I got my work belt on with all the tools in it. And I said, "I'm just here to help you, friend." He's okay. And that was like the only thing we said all day, and we just worked on putting this roof together. That's the cooperation that we need. Now, you see that all the time in the country. You frequently see that in suburban environments. You almost never see that in inner city, unless it's people on a block or in a building who are working together. But working together for common good, and sharing, not based on what you're making, but what you're giving. That's so important to our well-being. In fact, here it showed that those people who gave to other people when they were 50 and older lived a longer life, less likely to die. Quote, less likely to, and this is with 100 hours a year, that's 2 hours a week, a substantially reduced risk of mortality and developing physical limitations, and higher levels of subsequent physical activity and improved sense of well-being later as compared to individuals who did not volunteer. How about that? That's pretty good. Always good news. And then another study from University of Georgia showed that the fire retardant chemicals that are used in so many products we use can cause birth defects. This was published in Scientific Reports. So this is the polybrominated biphenyl 153. These are the primary chemicals that are used in flame retardant material. And they're in your furniture, unless you specifically say that you want something without chemical treatment. You're almost always going to get things that have been chemically treated. How would you know that this is impacting you? Well, skin color discoloration, headaches, dizziness, joint pain, and even some cancers have been linked to the exposure. And more striking, the children of those who were exposed seem to experience a host of health issues as well, including hernia or buildup of in the scrotum of newborn. One more reason to go all natural wherever possible. And finally today, Mozart can reduce seizure frequency in people with epilepsy. This is really cool. This is from Toronto Western Hospital. And a new clinical research study by a group of scientists at the Krembil Brain Institute of Toronto's Western Hospital, part of the University Health Network, found that Mozart composition can reduce the seizure frequency in patients with epilepsy. And this was published in the journal Epilepsy Open. Quote, the rhyme and rhythm of music in epilepsy. That was the title of the study. And sonatas for two pianos in D major, K, 448. That music and how it was composed, when listening to it, it completely facilitates helping the brain. And so that's important. So the quality of the music you listen to can directly impact that. And by the way, from Johns Hopkins University, published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, don't eat late, you will gain weight. That's simple. That's the latest on health and healing. We're 19 minutes into our program. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to play you, we're going to go directly into this nurse, because this is just one of the many things that's wrong with everything involving the COVID virus, and this is about its treatment. And remember, you got to have the ventilators. Well, the ventilators were actually killing people, and they were being given to people who didn't need them. And we got to get you tested. Well, people were getting a false test, meaning they're till to this day, there's still no accurate test. But they want to make sure you're all tested. But what if they're using the PCR, which is the wrong test? And then you come up positive. Then they're going to force you to what? Force you to be vaccinated? Well, everyone in New York is going to get vaccinated. Back in a moment, and we'll go right into this nurse.
Obviously, Elmhurst Hospital in Queens is right now the epicenter within the epicenter.
Elmhurst Hospital is the epicenter of the epicenter.
And Elmhurst Hospital is really at the center of this crisis here in the city and in the country, with doctors desperately trying to keep up with the growing number of patients as supplies dwindle.
And you see the black body bags? You say, what's in there? It's Elmhurst Hospital? Must be supplies. It's not supplies, it's people.
Also, from the beginning of the crisis, ventilators were described as essential life-saving equipment, initially in short supply.
You picked the 26,000 people who were going to die because you only sent 400 ventilators.
I knew that every person who needed a ventilator and didn't get one would die.
But why does New York, and Elmhurst in particular, appear to have been hit so much harder than other places in the United States? And were ventilators ever the right approach to treating COVID-19, especially once we realized that 60 to 90% of those vented do not survive? The experience and observations of Nurse Erin Olszewski seem to offer some answers to these pressing questions, while simultaneously providing frontline information about a number of other hot-button topics, including the disproportionate number of COVID deaths among Americans of color, the distortion surrounding do not resuscitate orders, the disregard for personal protective equipment standards, and the clustering of COVID positive with COVID negative patients, which she witnessed again and again, and the tremendous amount of nosocomial or hospital-acquired infections that resulted. Perhaps most urgently of all, she speaks of the therapies and protocols employed in her home state that did work. Erin was brought from Florida by a service funded by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. She spent almost a month at Elmhurst. What she saw there compelled her to become a reporter and whistleblower alongside her already extensive nursing duties. She made recordings, posted warnings on social media, and spoke through proxies about the nightmare conditions she witnessed. Erin was raised in Wisconsin and enlisted in the Army when she was 17, just before 9/11. She deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. Part of her duties involved overseeing aid disbursement and improvements to hospital facilities. While in country, she received the Army Commendation Medal for meritorious service and was wounded in combat. Erin eventually retired as a sergeant and became a civilian nurse in 2012. A mutual friend who was helping her make hidden camera recordings introduced us to Erin. After working a long shift at the hospital, she agreed to do an impromptu interview in her room at the Marriott Marquis overlooking Times Square. We encourage the viewer to leave aside their preconceptions about the nature of what is happening, to hear firsthand from an eyewitness who at great personal expense and without political prejudice of any kind now openly reports what she discovered in the hopes that the information will be put to good use to save lives. She began by telling us one of her most disturbing findings, that people who had repeatedly tested negative for COVID were being described as COVID confirmed.
Okay, so if you look close, I'm in my patient's chart. I am pulling up like their laboratory results. So if you look here, you'll see COVID-19 bioreference lab. Here are the test results. As you can see, 5/1/2020 at 17:16, not detected. They test for a second time, 5/4/2020 at 17:59, not detected. So both of those are negative. Scroll up to the top. This is my patient. They are on a vent and they are being called COVID-19 confirmed, droplet in contact and eye protection.
So this person is droplet and eye COVID confirmed. Positive A, click, not detected. No resulting lab available. Oh, pretty good.
While Erin was using her hidden camera to document another chart showing a patient with negative test results who nonetheless was labeled COVID confirmed, another travel nurse entered the room. They began to discuss what Erin was seeing.
If it says bioreference,
that's
that means
here.
It's done here.
So not detected here, but
So
it's presumptive. Now, they're all...
They are detected. They're saying it's positive. Not detected.
But it's not
What does
detected.
that say? What does that mean?
So I
You said that they were vented immediately upon being brought in, is that?
Yeah, so the thing is they're coming in with difficulty breathing, and a lot of these patients are really coming in with anxiety because they're scared. And when I was back home, I was working in the ED out in the tents, and most people that were coming through with like symptoms of just, anxiety, or they're worried and they're breathing fast, and then they get all nervous. So this is how the people are like coming in. Now, I'm not saying that some of them don't have COVID. Like there are people that come in and they really do need help, not to the extent of a vent, but they need help. But these other people, like this person who wasn't COVID multiple times, you know, and a lot of them are on either Medicaid or Medicare. They're poor. They're from, you know, a lower class. We're at a public hospital. They need the funding. So take them. They take them. And they tell them pretty much that if they don't get on a vent, then they're probably not going to survive. But the reality is, if they get on that vent, the likelihood of them walking out the hospital is slim to none.
And can I ask you, what like PEEP are they on, and is that being mandated or specified what the pressure is on the vent?
Here's the thing with this. So you don't have actual doctors that know critical care, ICU doctors on these floors. There's a dentist, and there are residents with these. So residents are essentially students, and they have no idea what they're doing. Like I had to police, actually today I had to police a resident because he wrote an order for me to run Versed, which is a medicine that you have to be very careful with because it can kill someone at like quadruple the speed of what you should be running it at the dose. And had I not known that, then I would have easily killed the patient. And it would have been okay under their COVID standards. So everything is kind of a wash. Nobody's held accountable for anything, and these people that are at vents are essentially being like, these residents are like practicing their skills on them. So they're practicing central lines, they're practicing like invasive procedures that are really unnecessary.
What is the percentage of Black, Latino, white? What's the racial composition?
Hispanic and Black for the majority.
And what's the age range?
Asian.
And Asian. And what's the age range?
20-year-olds all the way up to 70, 80-year-olds. Very few, I should say very few 80-year-olds, but the majority of people, I would say, are in their 40s or 50s.
Wow. And what percentage of the people that are in there would you say actually have tested positive for COVID?
Half. Probably half.
But everyone is being treated as though...
The entire hospital is COVID. So half the hospital is not COVID, but they're on COVID floors.
So let me just ask you about nosocomial infection. So you're saying they're putting non-COVID or COVID rule out with definite COVID patients?
Yes.
So I was only wondering, because like I was looking at like all the patient rooms, and like this patient is in with like a non-COVID. I don't understand why they're doing that.
I know. There's 4 patients in a row here on COVID. And this is supposed to be the COVID.
Yeah.
Because 7th floor, they've shut it down.
That's right. I'm confused.
And then they're going to have non-COVIDs there.
Yeah.
This is going to be the only COVID, so they shouldn't put any non-COVIDs here.
Well, that's what they've been doing.
They're banking on the fact that they'll get it because they're already immunocompromised. So and they'll put them in the same room. So there's double rooms. So you have a COVID with a non-COVID. They don't even care. We have enough rooms where they can be separated now because it's not as busy as it was, 4 weeks ago. But they don't care. They're just putting them together. I have that right now happening.
And like the guy over in...
I had 2 26 that were 2 negatives.
And they end up positive. Like the guy over in 29, I had him upstairs because I was on CCU before it.
Yeah.
And he came in with a stroke.
I know, that's what 26-1 was, a stroke.
And no COVID. And now he's got COVID and he's on a vent.
Well, because we gave it to him here.
I don't know how this ended up being COVID Central.
I know, but she literally came in with a broom, and then she left like 5 minutes later. My patient had died of COVID, and she didn't mop the floor. She was cleaning, getting prepared for my next patient, and she didn't mop the floor. I was like, that's
a standard.
I didn't think I had to tell her that.
Right. People don't know how to properly wear their PPE. Let's go back to Ebola. Like when Ebola was here, people took that very seriously. You have a nurse in the room in all the head to toe PPE. This is Ebola. This is I'm going to compare it. And you have another nurse that's outside the room handing supplies, the clean nurse and the dirty nurse, right? Going, and when they're taking their outfit off, one nurse is unzipping the back so she can take it out, walking out. They're not doing that here. We're wearing like our scrubs, and then we have maybe like a net top. Our pants are exposed. They're wearing booties over their shoes, but the booties are going room to room to room, and then people will wear them through the hospital.
So there's massive spread just through the improper use of the PPE.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. It looks good. It looks good. Looks like you're super safe, but in reality, it's ridiculous. So you'll go room to room. You'll maybe take that top off, put a new top on, but the rest of you is still exposed.
But I mean, why are they doing this?
I know. Suspected, and then there's like principal hospital. Does that mean like a nosocomial? Is that what that means?
Like, we have in the United States, and we've had it for a while, a rapid test. It's 45 minutes. Do you have COVID? Don't you? They're not doing the rapid test here.
They're not?
No.
Okay. At Elmhurst, you've never seen them?
Nope, they don't do it. It's too expensive. They do 5-day. It's like 5 to 7 day turnaround. In the meantime, they admit them onto COVID units. So non-COVIDs, the rule-outs, are going to COVID units and waiting for the results. Even though we have a rapid result, which is 45 minutes, and they're not doing it. No, not one.
But would you say it's too expensive? I mean, isn't this all getting charged to the fund anyway? I mean, why not do it? Why not? Are you saying that?
I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense to me. I asked that doctor about it.
How come you guys don't do the rapid test here?
Because city place, I mean, it exists. It's just they don't have access to it. There's only limited supply, so if you have deep pockets, you get it first.
Oh, so money.
Most times it's money about everything, yes.
That's sad.
It's reality.
I compare this hospital to a third world country. I've been in a third world country hospital in Iraq. The Iraq hospital is better than this one, and that says a lot. I've been there. I've been in both hospitals, and this is in the United States, and this hospital is treating low income, mostly people, and it almost makes me feel like they think these people are disposable, and they're not. They're people. People are not disposable, especially the ones that are struggling day in and day out, the hard workers, like trying to reach that American dream, and they're not given a chance because they're brought to this place where nobody cares.
And is there an understood financial incentive to diagnose COVID?
Yeah, of course. So in the hospital that I'm in right now, it's all COVID at this point. Every single floor is COVID, and they made it that way, obviously, for a reason, in my opinion. But a person cannot come to the floor unless they have a COVID diagnosis.
Is the reason, did they not want to cross-contaminate? Would that be the legitimate reason why you would create an all-COVID floor?
Here's why I will say no to that, is because they're admitting people for, quote, COVID rule out. So this guy was probably admitted COVID rule out, tested him, they saw that it came back negative. They probably already did something where they needed to now call him COVID, in the hopes that if they're putting him on a COVID floor and there's nurses going room to room to room, he will get it, and then they'll be back to when he does pass that he did have COVID.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a charge. I mean, what makes you think they really want them to get COVID? Because
money. Money. I think it's at least $29,000 per patient, and then you have to think you are also charging supplies and more supplies and more supplies. That's just like a bonus money.
But but the residents aren't getting that, right? I mean, why?
Oh, that's the thing. And I actually I've went at it with a lot of residents already, and they're order folk.
Okay, let's just see what we've learned. And this is an hour long. We've learned that non-COVID people were showing up in droves because of anxiety. And once they were in that environment, instead of given a rapid test that takes 45 minutes, they were frequently put in the hospital for 7 to 10 days with people with COVID, which meant that everybody was going to have it. They also make $29,000 on top of all the other bills that are going to be charged to a person, and that comes from the government. And then she showed you room after room that were supposed to be non-COVID, normal people in a hospital, from heart disease and diabetes, whatever it is, and yet they were in there with COVID patients. All it takes is one COVID patient to be in a room with non-COVID people, then everybody's got COVID. That's what we saw in the nursing homes. Now, all those people are indemnified. That's just reckless disregard for life by everyone in that hospital. Now, what you didn't hear was that they wanted to resuscitate people and they weren't allowed to. And there was no good reason not to. And also people would come in and be able to walk, and they were having some symptoms, but they would immediately be put on a ventilator and they would all die. And hence, and we had a doctor, a pulmonologist, and an emergency room doctor come out and do a little video on it. He was immediately scrubbed from Google and Facebook and everywhere else. But he turns out was telling the truth. So it's these nurses, these brave nurses coming forward and telling the truth, and physicians that you better listen to, not the hospital, not the CDC, not anyone in a government position, certainly not the governor. And in my belief, he should be held accountable for crimes against humanity. Anyhow, this is just some of the information. Now, on our next program, we're going to go into depth of what the newest science shows on all this. In a moment, I'm going to take a call from one of our listeners who called in thus far. Richard Gale is going to join us, and we're going to address some issues. And then we're going to end our program with a very positive, upbeat, but a powerful self-empowerment discussion. Let's say hello before we go to Richard Gale, so at least I can have a few people on the line here. Let's say hello to Pete from Tampa, Florida. Hi, Pete. You're on the line.
Hi. Thanks for letting me on first. Yeah, love your show. I just want to present this to people to think about, because it's easy to think about in this complex world. I'm thinking policemen should play football. Well, I mean, think about a quarterback. A quarterback goes back most of the time. I mean, he has to assess the situation. He says, should I hand off, throw a simple pass, or maybe tuck the ball away and run? And you don't throw a Hail Mary pass. That's for the last seconds. You got a lot of distance to cover. That's my analogy. And so I'm thinking about Eric Garner. What was that cop thinking? When you jump on someone's back like that, that's like a Hail Mary pass. But, what was Eric Garner doing? Maybe the store owner was complaining he's in front, he's loitering. The cops should go up and say, hey, Eric, can you move it along? And just the store, do something. Basically, when you jump on someone's back, or what this Chauvin guy did, is like a Hail Mary pass. That's like sudden death. You can kill someone. You don't do that. You do something simple, like a little handoff. You know what I'm saying? Just look at why are you using the most extreme tactics, deadly tactics, when something modest would do, like you say, or even if you have to say, hey, can you reach in your pockets, just show me, for instance, when you go to get on an airplane, they don't jump on, they don't tackle you, they say, empty your pocket.
I understand what you're trying to say. See if you can appreciate this add-on to what you've just said. We shouldn't have police going over to a car where someone is alleged to have passed off a $20 bill that was fake, because none of us know whether or not the cash we're carrying is fake or not. And if you go in, they'll do a mark on the bill, and if it's a 50 or 100, they'll put it in this little machine that zips out, and if it's not legitimate, they keep it. and then you still have to pay for your stuff. All of us have faced that at some point. But because of the color of this person, he was being racially profiled. That's racism. And that's systemic within the police in the United States. That is not, however, to mean that the 800,000 more or less police are all racist. They are not. I have close friends like the Ortegas and Mike and so many and Jimmy, all police. They're the right kind of police. They're there to protect the interest of a neighborhood. They come from a neighborhood, and they would talk through an issue rather than be forceful an issue. There was no reason this man was not resisting to have arrested him, to have done that in this manner. So we've got to change the entire procedures by which a police officer responds to a situation. And until we demilitarize it, until we start a whole new psychological way of dealing with who becomes a police officer and keep a lot of the people who are emotionally unfit out of the Corps, and then also have ways that a police officer has to come from the community. I've said this 1,000 times over the last 40 years. Every police officer should come from the community and therefore go door to door in the community saying, I'm the new police officer and I'm here to help you. What are the issues you would like for me to deal with? And then write them down, read them back to the person. So you're interested in the safety of your kids walking down the street. You're interested in how not to allow the gangbangers to do anything to you, your children, etc., or whatever the issue is. And that police officer says, I'm going to do everything I can, and I'm going to report back to you. And then you go back to that person, and you say, here's what I found, and here's what we can do together. I'm here for your protection. That's the kind of police we need, so we don't get to a Hail Mary pass of doing an excessive process that was trained more often than not in Israel, because the American public are not and should never allow themselves to be equated or treated like the Palestinians. That is one of the most inhumane places on earth of how the Palestinian people in their entirety are treated. Yes, you have bad police, and yes, they shouldn't be there, and yes, they should be held accountable, but we don't condemn all police. What we must condemn, and we must condemn it in its entirety, is our justice system. Because the police are only there to serve the justice system, not the people, and the justice system is there to serve the private corporations, and they're an extension of neoliberalism and vulture capitalism, the private prison system, the private contractors. So when you pull back far enough, you don't even start an escalation of a problem because you're trained not to.
Yeah, and as you know, a bad apple can spoil the other bunch with the mold, but a ripening apple can also help ripen other fruit. So you got to think about vicious cycles and virtuous cycles. It matters who you hire.
Pete, you're right, but your cliches are from Tampa. You've been living too long down there. The sun's baking out your brain. Come back to New York for a week, and we'll retemper you to reality.
All right, thank you.
But, hey, Pete, thank you very much. I appreciate you listening. I certainly appreciate your call. All the best.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go to Richard Gale. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Gary. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
I'm on. Good.
For those of you who are not aware, Richard Gale is one of our scholars in residence. He's the executive producer of this program, and we work for a long time together. And Richard's one of the people that goes deep into every issue. So I spoke with Richard the other evening about when I saw Don Lemon and Cuomo's brother, Chris Cuomo, over on CNN. And for me, I took away that we have to accept, without a big deal, the violence, not the protest, the violence that's occurring, because after all, we had our own, and one of them specifically mentioned the American Revolution and its taxes on the tea, which led to the tea rebellion and dumping the tea into the river or into the bay. And I thought, okay, I understand what they're saying, but first they're doing two things that I would challenge. First, they're justifying violence, and I don't believe there is a justification for violence unless it's the justification of self-defense, where you are being attacked on your property or person or your family, and you have every right under the law to defend yourself. That's not what this is. And instead, I suggested to Richard that we take a more honest and realistic look of this might be more of a moment to rebel against the whole history of civil rights being achieved, but always with pushback and resentment by those who were racist. So let us give a more accurate and honest reference of what we're experiencing in the legitimacy of our protests, but the illegitimacy of the violence by those Leninists and those anarchists who have a different agenda than honoring the person who was slain by the police officer, not just this one, but others before them. And they're conflating the two. They're hiding within the legitimacy of the protest movement, so you can't criticize them. Otherwise, it seems like you're criticizing the whole movement. Your thoughts, Richard?
Yeah. Well, you had asked me to kind of look back also, going back into the 19th century as well. And there were no real large, certainly not any nationwide protests by the African American community during the 19th century. There was Nat Turner's slave rebellion, the first real slave rebellion that occurred in the United States in 1831, and that was in Southampton County, Virginia. And there was other small ones. There was John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859. But there was also this a reign of terror that you can almost say that went throughout the African American community, all the way up and through the Jim Crow laws were related to what we call terror lynchings. And these were horrific acts of violence, and the perpetrators of these were never held accountable. And they can be perceived and viewed as like public spectacles. They were attended by an entire white community, and they were conducted almost as a celebratory event to show racial control and domination over the African American community. So these terror lynchings could be almost perceived as a kind of a tool to be used to enforce the Jim Crow laws and racial segregation in the southern states. I think one of the real interesting things when we speak about violence, and it was in 1919, and it was sometimes called the Red Summer. I think it was launched really in Chicago among the whites who were what had happened at that time. World War I had ended. And while our soldiers were off in Europe fighting the war, many African Americans would come up from the South, and they were getting jobs in the stockyards or on the shipyards and on farms in the North. So when these soldiers returned, there was this competition for jobs. And this in 1919, there was just a flurry of riots that erupted throughout Philadelphia and Knoxville, Charleston, South Carolina, New York, Port Arthur, Texas, quite a few in Florida, in Norfolk, Virginia, when African American black soldiers were returning from the war, coming back on their ships, and all the African community was there to greet them. They were immediately attacked by white mobs, and these were. All of these, one case in Corbin, Kentucky was interesting because all the town residents just rounded up to 200 black residents in the town and just put them on a freight train and sent them off to wherever. And the culmination, I think, of that was later in 1921 with the Greenwood district in Tulsa, which was the wealthiest African-American neighborhood in the United States up to that time. And and the whites burned down all the blocks. It was probably at that time was the worst racial violence in the United States history, and 10,000 blacks were left homeless. So the one thing here is nobody was ever held accountable for all these riots and burning downs of African-American stores and the lynchings that were going on in the southern states. So we do see that if we're going to look at history and protest, most violent history we can really look at were whites perpetuating violence on blacks up until the start of the modern civil rights movement. You want me to go in some other directions?
Yes, continue.
Yeah. Well, I think it was Gary and I were speaking about earlier, but the civil rights movement has always been nonviolent, based on Gandhian principles and the principles of Martin Luther King, and we do see that amongst many of the current protesters and demonstrators who do support those values and nonviolent protests. The issue of those that are perpetuating the violence and looting and all is as we've been discovering, is a far more complex issue because there's so many different groups involved, and to even know which is which and who's infiltrating who because of social media, it's become very blurred, in my opinion, to be able to really see who's doing what. In some ways, it's almost proper to look at the right-wing kind of militant white supremacist patriot groups almost coming from the identical psychological mindset as groups as like Antifa. Ideologies may differ, but in terms of the deeper psychology from which both are operating from, they're almost, in my opinion, almost identical. It doesn't really matter what their ideologies are. It comes from the same kind of violent background.
Let's finish up by speaking about the police having almost 300,000 of its 800,000 members coming from war zones around the world, Afghanistan and Iraq, and bringing frequently post-traumatic stress disorder, the medications they're on, which are causing about anywhere from 20 to 22 per day to commit suicide. And then you start getting these people into an environment where they're supposed to be dealing with individuals, but this is not a war zone. And you can't suddenly be treating someone that you're meeting on the street as if it's a war zone, and therefore that's a potential killer of you, because that can cause an excessive reaction, and that's why we have all these kill shots.
I find this really interesting because we speak about the weaponization of our law enforcement, but that part of that weaponization are the people that are being recruited into our police departments. And I've uncovered some very interesting studies. The police departments, this International Association of Chiefs of Police, and they published a large document called Employing Returning Combat Veterans as Law Enforcement Officers. What we're seeing is that for police departments today, there's a certain loyalty, a certain discipline, a fearlessness in being able to take appropriate actions that is very admirable for many of the police departments. So they even do county job fairs that will target veterans. The big problem with this is a Marshall Project study release reported was that the prevalence of military veterans complicates the relationship between the police and the communities that they're meant to serve. So if you can imagine, if you were just a villager in Iraq or Afghanistan, and how would you perceive the American troops there as an occupying force? And so you can almost look and see how in many neighborhoods where the police act or understood as an occupying force. And in fact, many of these policemen are war veterans or from the Iraq Middle East war veterans. The project's conclusions were one issue is the veterans who work as police have been shown to be the most vulnerable to self-destructive behavior, such as alcohol abuse, drugs, and suicide attempts. That's one thing in their findings. The second, I think, important was the law enforcement makes very little effort whatsoever to do any kind of mental health screening for cops who are returning from military deployment, and they also don't offer any or little to no treatment if in fact they are diagnosed with a mental disorder. Third is that the police department's hiring preferences for veterans tended to be have been shown to be disproportionately white. And this, in turn, makes it harder to build police forces that really represent and can understand the very diverse communities that these forces are patrolling. So again, it comes off as I mentioned before, as kind of almost like an occupying force in your neighborhood, with this disparity between the police force and the neighborhood that they're responsible to control. And then there was a University of Texas study that also from the School of Public Health that found there was a study done on Dallas police, but they found that those with military experience were far more trigger happy to shoot and to commit unnecessary violence on suspects than those who are not veterans. And when you consider that there's approximately 1 million people today who make up our law enforcement. Now, that's everything, whether you're a prison guard or whether a jailer or an auxiliary police force or full-time on a police force, park rangers, SWAT teams. About a third of those are veterans from and of course, in our generation, so it would be from the Iraq and Afghan wars. Yes.
Yeah, we're out of time, but we should also remember this. People of color, which are almost all the people in the Middle East, whether they're Syrians or from Libya or Iraq, Afghanistan, these are people who have been treated very poorly by occupying forces. There are hundreds of thousands of cases of people being brutalized, burst into in the middle of the night, people shot, a woman raped, then her whole family killed. That person was brought to justice, but then he was also, I believe, pardoned by President Trump. So bringing that same mindset, if you were one of those perpetrators back in the United States and become a police officer, that is not the kind of police we need. So I thank you for doing some homework there and bringing it to our audience. Again, we need to change the entirety of our justice system, not just the police. They're part of it. And we need to get back to where you can speak without fear. You will not be profiled for stop and searching. You will not be looked upon as if somehow you deserve a longer sentence for the same crime that you would let a Caucasian pass and not give him a prison sentence. The entire system must change, and the politicians protecting these special interest groups must be voted out of office. And that's Democrats and Republicans alike. I'm Gary Null. Thank you all for listening, and have a nice day.